As a country, we want to be known as a country that supplies the best grown products into the market. So we don't want this image to be eroded by the fact that our numbers on FCM is going up. So we are doing everything that is necessary for us to do that. So building knowledge and innovation around this becomes very important. We believe that we have other controls that have been put in place because of the systems approach protocol that we have. But we're also looking at the possibility of having biological controls. And that is why it's important for us to have another layer as we are looking at much more mechanical and chemical and other ways in which we control this across the entire supply chain. We add another layer of biologicals. Biologicals come from products that have been created out of organic matter or much more natural. And when we look at the use of chemicals and the debate that is ongoing around pesticides, around fungicides, around all these chemicals, we see biologicals as an alternative to this. And therefore, if it comes in and we have a proper understanding of how they can be used to control FCM, I think we'll be in a better place. We're also giving choices and options to the growers exporters. And I live in a world where people need options. Whatever works for them and is effective and allowed, I think people need options so that we are not just looking at one and saying, yeah, this is the only one. When people have options and they are able to use as much as possible, then it gives us an opportunity to mitigate the current challenge as possible.
Synthetic products, they are reducing over time. Before, you could spray a lot of molecules. Nowadays, those molecules are less and less available, and especially the systemic ones. Systemic molecules are within the plants, and they also eventually are found in your plate. That's why they are being banned slowly. So we are left with fewer chemicals, and most of them are contact chemicals. When you deal with a pest like FCM, it's very difficult to achieve contact because as soon as the egg will arch, it goes and dig inside the fruits or the flower and it hides, making most contacts non-relevant. So the advantage of the biological is that we are able to disrupt their communication at the adult stage and prevent the mating, which is what can really help breaking the cycle. Currently, in our company, and I think it's shared with many biological companies, we have a growth rate of 30 to 40% in terms of sales, which is showing that the trend is going high, that people are adopting more and more, while the synthetic companies, purely synthetic companies, are more or less stagnant or even sometimes reducing. So definitely, I believe most growers are now shifting to biological solution. It is a good news for the food that we are consuming. The only point that is still a bit worrying me is that the shift is happening way faster in the export crops that are going to foreign markets. And in Kenya, for the locally consumed product, we are still heavily relying on the chemicals, which I also live in Kenya, and that's what we are eating every day. In the smallholder markets, for the local markets, a first aspect is lack of finance. Today we had a big session with avocados, and we have seen we have to control a lot of the biological solution, and the most effective solution, they comes with prevention. And you start preventing when? Maybe from flowering with your pheromone traps. And you start taking control action very early when the fruit is like a chicken egg size. This is sometimes 6 months before the farmer gets to harvest and gets to have money in his pocket. So in the smallholder market setup, sometimes what drives the decision making is not what do I need to do now, is how much money I have in my pocket right now. So that's a big factor. Second, accessibility to the product. As I said, it is much more easy for me, a private company, to go to reach 130 flower farms or 50 large scale or medium scale export growers of avocado than to see thousands and thousands of smallholder farmers that have sometimes as little as a few trees, like 10 or 15 trees around their house. So this is also difficult for me as a private entity. And as I mentioned, the third aspect is really access to knowledge, because when you are using biological, you need to know your pest, know how to monitor, know how to prevent. There is a lot of knowledge that you need. That back in the days with chemical only, you would just come, spray, and it's a done deal. So the biological presents many benefits in terms of health. I will not remind that, but also in terms of efficacy. It can be better in efficacy, but it requires knowledge in France.
So for any pest, one has to look at the life cycle. So you know that the female has to mate with a male to cause a fertile egg, and to cause a fertile egg, then the egg becomes a larvae and the larvae becomes a pupa. The larvae is the one that's creating the damage. So it's very important to have a control strategy at each stage. For the larvae and the egg stage, it's nice to use parasitoids, virus, bacteria, and even in some cases, you can use insecticide. For the adult stage to go to eggs, it's good to use mating disruption or attract and kill. So one has a control at each stage of the life cycle. Then one can use a monitoring trap to monitor on your farm where are the pests and when are they there. Once you have that information, you can then use one of these control techniques to put into the system. So this is all part of the pre-harvest systems approach. So you monitor, then you do control, but then you must also do inspection of your roses before your avocados, before they get exported. And that's another stage where you can pick up FCM. If there's a larvae on the rose, you can just throw it away. Just that one rose you throw away. And you have as many checks as you can before you export. Because if you get a larvae when you export, they don't just throw away the one rose, but they throw away that whole consignment of roses. So you have to ensure that at each stage, on the farm, after you're off the farm, there's an inspection at the harbor. At each stage, you are trying to take individuals out. So you start with a lot, and it becomes less and less and less and less, and then by the end, there's nothing, no FCM left, and you can export FCM-free crops to Europe. The most dangerous, if not controlled, is the adult stage because it's where the mating is happening. Each female can lay on average 130 female eggs. So the population growth is very quick. It goes from 1 to 130. The next generation, those 130 females lay another 130 eggs that are also female. So it goes 130 to 16,900. A month later, you can have 2.1 million moths. So this is a very dangerous stage, so you have to control it. The fertile eggs, we need to stop. And then the larvae is the one that's making the damage. So we've got the economic problem of loss of roses or fruit, but we also have the problem of potentially exporting false codling moth to other regions. So we first have to get the population down, and then we have to ensure that the larvae that are in the fruit, they also get killed.